It is day 7 of the 12 days of birth stories, and I cannot believe we've made it more than halfway through our series. It's pretty awesome, and we've heard some really beautiful stories so far. Today we're going to talk with Carly in a minute, and she's going to share with us about her experience and what she had to navigate. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear from her. A little bit about the project before we get started. This came about because I just kept hearing from women, who wanted to tell their birth stories, and it just never felt like there was enough time. And every time we did have circles where women shared their birth stories, everyone benefited from hearing that someone else had a different experience or a similar experience. They were able to build off of each other and be in community and hold space, but also relate. And there's a lot of education that's been going around in our series on birth from the viewpoint of women, which I think is just so different and so needed. We need to hear from women about their lived experiences in birth in order to, be part of this movement of something different. So I'm going to welcome Carly in. Support the project. There's a link in my bio. You can buy me a cup of coffee. So let us know in the comments if you have any questions for Carly as she chats with us. And I will do my best to keep up and insert them where possible. But how are you, Carly? Here you are. Working.
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I was volunteering this morning and I had a short window to get in the door and get organized. So fingers crossed that everything goes according to plan.
Could be good. We'll roll with the punches.
And you've got your little one sleeping, you said?
I got her down at 11:50. So hopefully She normally gives me like an hour. So we'll see what we get.
Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself and how many kiddos you have? So I also want to say, I do know some of the women who are part of the series, but some of the women I haven't talked to before, or haven't talked to them about their birth experience before. So I tried to keep it pretty fresh. So I know a little bit about you. I've been catching some of your stories lately on Instagram. But yeah, introduce yourself. Tell us about you.
My name is Carly Griffin. I am a 28-year-old mom of 3 little girls. I have a 5-year-old, she'll be 3 in January. So she's 2 right now, and a 5-month-old.
Amazing.
So busy is what's happening over here, but lots of love, to be honest with you. And we're loving it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm an entrepreneur, so I work from home. I did do a little bit of working for a real estate team here in Peterborough before I went on maternity leave this time. And I ran their social media accounts and whatnot. So that's a little bit of what I do. I was also an early childhood educator for 5 to 10 years. I have my doula certificate, my birth doula certificate. I dabble in a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. I love to.
As most of us do. Yeah. I feel like that's just the modern way. Our world has shifted and we all just are trying all these different things and pivoting every 2 seconds to try to make it all work. So
yeah, why not, right?
Yes. Okay, so you've got 3 little ones. Whose birth story, do you want to contextualize any of the births first, or do you want to focus on a specific birth story? What were you thinking?
They kind of all have been completely different, as per usual. So I ended up having preeclampsia with 2 of my births, which was my first and my second. My third, we got off scotch-free somehow. And my first birth experience was when it actually developed into HELLP syndrome.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So did you know anything about preeclampsia or HELLP syndrome before you were pregnant?
No. I had no idea.
One of my moms was asking me at the gathering. She's like, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to learn more. It was like a little marketing ploy, stay tuned. Carly's going to tell us all about it.
Yeah, honestly, I no idea. And honestly, even when it was happening, when I was in labor giving birth, I had no idea what was happening or how
Okay.
extreme it was.
Okay. So do you want to walk us through your first experience?
Yeah, for sure. So I ended up actually having her on my 23rd birthday.
Oh, wow.
Right? Wow. Holy cow. So it was November, and I had never had a pregnancy experience before. To this extent. I had had losses previously. However, I had
Okay.
never had a full-term pregnancy. So I had never been to 36 weeks pregnant. I had no idea. I also had no friends or close people in my life who had been pregnant before or had babies that I could talk to about what I was feeling. I was the first one in that close friend group. And so with that, I really was just taking it day by day. I knew that I wasn't going to feel good and all of this stuff, but I didn't know the extent or like warning signs to pay attention to or anything like that. And
Who were
so
your care providers?
I was with Partners in Pregnancy.
Okay. So for folks who don't know what that is outside of Peterborough, so it's a clinic space where a bunch of different practitioners come and take turns seeing clients, and they have little teams that they develop for each of the pregnant clients. They also have, I believe they still have social workers and a lactation consultant as part of their team. So it's like you see an OB, but they are sort of this I don't know, how else would you describe it? It's a different experience than going to an OB, but you're still seeing a crew of these people.
Yeah. So for me, what was my deciding factor for going there was I really wanted a woman to help to be there when I delivered. I wanted a woman doctor. I also have a lot of health issues previous to this. So when I went to go look at like midwife route, my mom actually was like, I would really prefer you not. I want you at the hospital. I also want to I live like 45 minutes away from anything. So she was like, you need to be at the hospital. And so I was like, okay, Mom. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I went and I said, I want a woman doctor and I want to know who it's going to be. I don't want an on-call doctor just to walk in if I can prevent that.
Yeah.
And so when I went to make my decision, it's actually a group of 10 female doctors.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Work as a team. And so like all of your notes are shared amongst all 10 of them. Throughout your 40 weeks of pregnancy, you can schedule your appointments with all of them or one of them or however you want to do it so that like you get to know them. I wanted to know everybody because I wanted to know who it was when they walked in the room. And so I went to everybody. I met all of the doctors. I had appointments with all of them. They all followed my pregnancy. I had a completely normal pregnancy, no red flags, no nothing, up until I was 36 weeks pregnant.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just good to unpack that because it's a unique model of care. And I wasn't sure if they were all women, so that's really cool that you shared that with us. And yeah, it's kind of like a custom made schedule, which is also neat. And I feel like they take a little bit more time during appointments there compared to what your experience would be with an OB. So it's a unique, I don't know if other cities have it. You guys can let us know if you have something like that in your city, but I think it's a unique part of what we have available here.
Yeah. And they follow you after your pregnancy too. Like they'll see you for like up to your 6-week appointment. And then they actually will follow you up to a year postpartum if you need any sort of therapy help. They have therapists that will help you, all that sort of stuff. So I found that super beneficial.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So
okay, so up to 36 weeks, you were good to go. Everything was tickety-boo. Okay.
I had a lot of inflammation. I was very swollen. However, nobody pinpointed that as a red flag. And so I was assuming that was just normal and that just kind of came along with pregnancy. I also was a very, very, very small, I am a very small person. And so pre-pregnancy, I was teensy tiny, and I gained upwards of 80 pounds during my pregnancy. Yes.
That's a lot.
And at the end, I was like almost unrecognizable in my face.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so, and I couldn't put shoes on. Like, I was very swollen, a lot of inflammation happening, to the point that now I know that that's a red flag and a warning sign. And it's like the point that like that should have been marked. But it being my first pregnancy and not knowing and not being around people or anything, I wasn't, so I didn't know. So I had all of that going on, and I went to my 36-week appointment and everything was okay. And then a couple days after that, I started having like cramping and stuff. And I was like, okay, like I'm just going to pay attention and whatever. Ended up losing a little bit of my mucus plug.
Okay.
And so then I was just paying attention and I was just being aware. And this was on the 9th of November. Everly is born on the 12th.
Okay.
So on the 9th, I started feeling like, ugh. And I just laid on the couch, whatever, hung out. And then on the 10th, I thought it was still ongoing. I was still cramping every like 20 minutes. I'd have like just like a feeling, but didn't know. And so I was like, okay, also didn't have a blood pressure monitor at home, so wasn't monitoring anything like that.
Yep.
And so then went to the hospital actually on the 10th, because I said to Jordan, my partner, something just doesn't feel right. And I'm scared at this point of feeling like this for 2 days. I would just rather be safe than sorry. So on the 10th, we went in, and I had lost my mucus plug the day before, what I thought was my whole mucus plug, but was actually just a bit of it.
Yeah.
So I ended up going into the hospital, got checked out, had not the best experience, to be honest with you.
So this is in like the assessment room. Oh, can you hold on just 1 second? I just hear some kerfuffles with cats. My cat likes to be a dog. He's probably eating something. Hold on 1 little second. 1 second.
No worries.
Okay. This is the culprit.
Oh,
he's doing something. He's very cute, but he's incredibly naughty. So just try to keep him contained. Okay, so this was in the like going into labor and delivery and like getting an assessment that you didn't have a good experience. Tell us more.
So yeah, basically just the nurse that I got partnered with. When you go in, you get sent right up to labor and delivery at that point. So I got up there, a nurse, just random nurse just gets selected and sent to you. Oh my gosh, that kitten. And and so we didn't really vibe right off the get-go. And I'm a very like I'm going to make the best out of any experience that I get put in, because that's in my control. And when I feel like things are out of my control, all I can control is my own personality. And so I'm going to try my best to be positive. And so that's what I was doing. And I was just happy-go-lucky, like trying my best. And she was like, well, this is what it feels like to be 36 weeks pregnant. And I was like, very dismissive. And so I was just like, okay, I don't know. And so went home. Thankfully, the next day, I had a doctor's appointment at the Pipsy office in the morning.
Okay.
And so that gave me comfort in leaving the hospital, because they said that I was having contractions on the chart every 10 minutes, but it was just a mild contraction. And they also said my blood pressure was a little bit elevated, but they weren't overly concerned. So I was like, okay, sounds good. Left, whatever, woke up the next day actually feeling great.
Okay.
Better than I had felt the past 2 days.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, let's go to the doctor. This is perfect. And so I go into the doctor, and that was the day I turned 37 weeks. And so I go to the doctor, and they put me on the blood pressure monitor, and my numbers are like sky high. And they were like, this is concerning. And I was like, well, I was at the hospital yesterday and told them the whole story. And they said, you need to go and have a baby now. And I was like, oh, whoa. And so I was not even remotely prepared for that. Never had a baby, nothing, right? Didn't have a hospital bag with me. Like I was just
Uh,
in
you
the
had like a month and a half maybe left to go. Yeah, lots of time.
yeah.
Hmm.
And then it was like, oh, and I was like, I was just there yesterday and they told me this is what it feels like. Like, what do you mean? And so then I ended up saying, okay, so I made the phone calls I had to make and went up to the hospital. It ended up being that massive, massive snowstorm that day.
Oh, wow.
And so it was crazy. And I got there, and that was at about 4 o'clock that I arrived. They did my blood work, everything was done, and they started the pre-induction at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And so for pre-induction, for me, they did a Foley balloon.
Mm. Okay.
And that was when I found out that I had actually a very high pain tolerance or threshold, which I didn't know. But they said, you're handling this very well. And so I was like,
Mhm.
okay, that's a good sign. And I still carried my little positive attitude as far as I could throughout. And I was just like trying to make the best out of it. And my mom actually works at the hospital. And
Okay.
so she brought up Tim Hortons for everybody. And we were doing what we could do to make it a good experience.
Yes.
And and things went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. And so to give you an overview, I started the pre-induction with the Foley was inserted just after 6 p.m. and
Yeah.
Everly was born at 12:22.
Okay.
So the entire thing happened within 6
Yeah.
hours.
Very, very quickly. Yeah.
Very quickly. And within that 6 hours, I was taken down for chest x-rays. I was taken down for ultrasounds. I was carted around the hospital.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
And then at the end of it all, like when things started to get really serious, I was told I wasn't allowed to have an epidural. Um, I was told I had 15 minutes to push the baby out before I had to go for a C-section. They actually moved me down to the room beside the OR, like prepping it.
Yeah.
And like it was like everything was happening so quickly, and it started with nothing, to be honest. Like I felt the best I'd felt.
Did you have, were you also on Pitocin? Did you have increasing contractions during this time? Were you like also coping with, labor progressing? I mean, you went from like Foley can take, so for perspective for most people, if you were induced with a Foley bulb, you would probably go home, sleep for the night, and then come in for an appointment the next day. Check, did it do anything? So it's quite a long, it can tip the scales for some people, and they can have no interventions after that. Lots of people continue to have them, but it takes like a day, like pretty comfortably for things to move on. So they were, I'm guessing your blood pressure didn't go down during that time, and they were just adding things into the mix to check on you and baby and to make this birth happen.
Pretty much. So it was like things started to get progressively worse. And it started with, okay, we're going to put the Foley in, we're going to send you home. And then it started, okay, well, your blood pressure is getting a little bit higher. So would it be okay if you stayed the night and we monitored you?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll start your induction in the morning.
Yeah.
And I thought, no problem, sure. The next day was my birthday. So I thought, great, I'm going to be induced my whole day in labor. But that was fine. I said, no problem. So that was it. And then they put an IV in and they said, we're just going to put this in for precaution and we'll start your drip in the morning. And I said, okay, no problem. And then thankfully they did, because things went wild. And I would say probably within 2 hours, I was dilated to about a 4 and I was having severe chest pain.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And at that point I looked at Jordan and I said, like something is wrong with my heart. And
Mm-hmm.
background or a little history, I have multiple heart conditions. So I
Okay.
have seen heart specialists. I'm very in tune with my body.
Mm-hmm. You're well versed.
Yes. And so I looked at the nurse, and another fun fact was the nurse that was on that night was the same nurse that sent me home the day before.
Oh, joyous.
Yes. So I walked in and she said, "Oh, you came back." And I said, "No, the doctor sent me here and they said I'm having a baby today."
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, okay." And so we were really probably not starting off on the best, like, woo woo. So that's fine. Now, being more experienced, I know that it's okay that if you're uncomfortable with the person providing care for you, you can ask for a different nurse. And I would do that now.
Yeah, because you just essentially, you just not by doing anything, but just by virtue of being there and of the symptoms you were having, you called in her job into question, and basically like you're like, you fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, and there's no way around that, because yeah, you're in an emergency situation where yeah, there's a life-threatening thing happen. You also have previous health conditions, so there's lots of things stacked up against this person that would just influence how they would like baseline, influence how they would go about their day, because they're human and would probably have some feels about that. One, positive or negative or whatever. So yeah, that would influence how they would move forward caring for you. But also you had this experience with them where they didn't care for you. And they put you in a very precarious situation. And thankfully you were able to come back under, good care and advisement and are now being taken care of. But yeah, your comfort level with this person was compromised, right? Your trust.
That's what I was just going to say. My trust had completely diminished. And so I was going into this vulnerable situation that I had never done before or had anyone close to me done before, without any knowledge, without really, I didn't know the importance back then as a 22-year-old of doing research on all of the things that could happen or what all goes into birth at 22 that I do now, right? And so I was uneducated and unaware and completely wanting to trust the people. And then she walked in the room. And so I already had like a whoa wall up. And so we had that experience.
Help your BP.
Right? That's the other thing. We're trying to keep my blood pressure down and we're already on the walls here. And so it started with my blood pressure. Everything was good. I started saying, I'm having heart pain, all of this stuff. Something's wrong with my chest. It feels like tightening. It feels like it's burning, all of these things. And I said, and it's twisting. Like I feel like someone is twisting in my chest. And Jordan was like, do you need me to get somebody? And I was like, yeah, like something needs to happen. This isn't okay. So the nurse came in and she said, oh, you're having heartburn. And I said,
okay.
Nope. I've had heartburn this whole pregnancy and this is not it. And so she ended up giving me a shot of, I'm not sure what it is, but it's to coat your throat for the heartburn. And I said, if I take that, I'm going to be sick. And I took it and I was sick. And after that, I said, like, this is not okay. Like I'm starting to be concerned. And I got hot water bottles at that point. And so, yeah,
struggling with this.
I am, full on labor, contractions happening every like 10 minutes, dilating, a Foley balloon inserted, chest pain out the wazoo, with a hot water bottle as hard as I can push it into my chest. And I put one on my back under the bed and laid on it. So I had it coming like from both sides. And it was like excruciating pain. And so then they said, we're going to send you down for a chest x-ray. And I said, okay, sounds good. So off I got off the bed, onto a stretcher, down I went through the hospital, down to the x-ray. And I get down and they say, okay, come on off the bed. And I was like, what? And they're like, you have to stand up for a chest x-ray. And I was like,
Oh dear.
okay. And so I'm like, I just need 1 minute because I'm having a contraction. So I finished my contraction and I said, you've got like 3 minutes. And she was like, okay, we could do this. So I'm standing there and she hands me a weighted vest. And I'm like, okay.
To a tiny pregnant lady who's already going to topple over.
Right? I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. You're got 2 minutes left. So she takes her pictures and I get back on the stretcher and I get another contraction, but it worked out perfect timing.
Okay,
and I
good.
went back up to labor and delivery, and I was up there for maybe 10 minutes, and they said, we need to send you down for an ultrasound to make sure that baby is okay. And I said, so down I go again, all the way back through, down to ultrasound. Baby's looking great. No concerns with baby. She's thriving. She's doing this on her ultrasound picture. I am like, that is all I needed to see right now. Thank you. And it was amazing. And so that was at about 9 o'clock, 9:10 p.m. At this point, they also had already sent my mom home because nothing was supposed to happen until the morning. And then things started happening so quickly that the last thing I thought was get my phone. And Jordan was so worried about me that he wasn't worried about being on his phone either, right? So we weren't sending updates to anybody, and everybody thought that nothing was happening until the morning. They figured we were just asleep. And so this was at about 10 p.m. And then I come back up from the ultrasound, and this is when I'm in the room beside the OR at this point. And that's when I knew something had shifted. I also feel like I need to say at this point, I started to kind of disassociate because I was in so much pain and I felt unsafe. I was everywhere but where I wanted to be. And I was like, if I'm going to get through this, I'm going to have to like take myself out of my body right now. And so,
yeah, and you were still having your chest pains. Like they didn't do anything to remedy that. Okay.
No, all I had was a hot water bottle. And so, yeah. And then I get in the room and things are like seriously happening at this point. Like I'm having back-to-back contractions. It's not going well. And then people are starting to say, oh, she's going to seize. Oh, she's going to seize. And at that point, I looked at Jordan and I remember his face being like, what do I do if she starts to have a seizure and she's in the middle of giving birth? And like for him, he said he felt very hopeless or helpless.
Yeah, both probably.
Yeah, right? And very scary. Like you don't expect that when you have no idea. Like you just expect to go in and have a baby. You don't know what's going on. And so I was used to like, I had heard about people having high blood pressure. I had heard about people having like not great birth experiences and stuff, but I had never heard of a full birth story of things that can possibly happen and things that you should be aware of and your options if that were to happen to you.
Yep.
So at the time, I still had no idea how severe this was. I was just doing what I was told to do. And at this point, we had, not only was the nurse there, we had a PIPSI doctor. She also then had to call an obstetrician doctor. They also had to call a response team for me. Then we had to have a NICU baby team because Everly was premature. Then we also had to have a response team in case something was wrong and she didn't make it to the NICU. So it went from being me and Jordan in the room hanging out to me and 50 people.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math in my head. That's like at least 20 adults.
Crazy. It was crazy. It was anywhere you looked, there was a team of people. And so I probably had, as I was pushing, I want to say like anywhere between 8 to 10 people around the bed.
Wow.
And to me, that was all I knew. I had no idea that wasn't normal. And
right.
so until my second birth, where it was just the one nurse and George, I thought, where is everybody?
Where's my audience?
Right? Like, what is going on? And so, anywho, long story short, I had all of these people in the room, and I was not there at that point. I was elsewhere, checked out. The nurse that I had scurried over to me on her wheelie cart and said, I have some news that you're really not going to like. And at this point, it was about, I want to say about 11:30, quarter to 12. And I said, oh God, what can you tell me now? Like, what can you hit me with? And she said, you're not going to be able to get the epidural. And I said, why? And she said, your platelets. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, your platelets are so low that if we give you the epidural, it could cause a hemorrhage. Wow. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, but we can give you laughing gas. And I said, I'll take what I can get. And so I put the mask on, and I had the mask for about 3 seconds, it felt like. And they said, we got to get this baby out. You've got 15 minutes before we have to take you to the OR, and you're going to have to get an emergency C-section. And with that emergency C-section, because I wasn't allowed an epidural or any medication, I would have had to be completely sedated. So I would have missed my first birth, essentially. And with that, you're not allowed to see your baby until the next day when you're like fully coherent. So that was the last thing that I wanted. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, let's do this. And miraculously, I managed to push her out within 13 minutes.
Oh, wow. Good
but we had to use a little bit of a vacuum.
Okay.
And I was cool with that. Everything ended up working out. She ended up coming out. Everything was okay. When she came out, we never actually got skin to skin until about 10 to 15 minutes after she was born. Simply because they had to check her. And then they had to check me. And at this point, I was really the issue.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry. My baby's waking up. She's going to join the party. Just give me 1 second.
Go ahead. Go grab her. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Carly's story, because we're seeing a lot of how healthcare happens to you and not like alongside you. And some things that are coming up for me is like hiding information, keeping the information about what they think she's experiencing hidden because they don't want to scare the family or they don't want to put them into a panic. But then you miss that opportunity to make informed choices for yourself and for your baby and for your family. And that feeling of, just kind of contextualizing what you're saying, that feeling of like hopelessness and helplessness that partners feel, that partners are not, we've been talking about preparation for birth, like partners are not prepared for birth, like are not prepared for these experiences that can happen. And it's very, very traumatizing, again, to you as a birthing person, but also to your partner. And I'll let you finish your story, but I'm curious if you can comment later, maybe on how he was coping post-birth, because we don't talk about PTSD from birth for partners, but it sounds like he would have been a good candidate for that, unfortunately.
He was a superstar. From the minute everything happened, because I was so checked out, he was so checked in. And so I didn't know what patients I was on. I had no idea what needed to be done. I also wasn't allowed to get out of the bed because my blood
Yeah.
pressure spike. And so he did it all. They would come in and he would say she hasn't had Tylenol or Advil in 8 hours, and she's on this amount of this drip, and she's on, like, it was incredible. Thank God. Thank God for him.
We call that like the gatekeeper, or like the guardian. That's the role that various people can play, but partners can play. Is you're the one who is, and has the running tally of what's happening, medication, timing, and you're kind of opening the flow of that information, and also that support, based on what you know and what you're experiencing. So wow, good for him.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, he's the kind of guy that had never had experience with babies before. He had never held a baby before. And so this baby came out into the world, and I couldn't get out of the bed to pick her up. I couldn't change diapers. I wasn't allowed to turn the lights on in the room because it would make my blood pressure spike. So he had to, and I was also 37 weeks pregnant. So I had to be pumping, and what comes along with pumping is washing all of those parts every hour, and all of that, all of the diaper changes, monitoring all of my medications. It was, and then postpartum, it was incredible. Postpartum, I had to actually take 6 weeks of needles in my belly.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Every day for 6 weeks, I had to get one needle in my belly. And they gave me the sorry, pardon?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, so people can know, what was that for? Was it for your heart? What was it for your platelets?
It was for my my blood was, I think it was a blood thinner, so that I didn't end up getting a blood clot.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, so it was a blood thinner. And so I had to take that for 6 weeks to prevent blood clots, which, when you're postpartum and you're bleeding, you really probably don't want to be on a blood thinner. But that's your
Or
option.
sticking a needle in your belly.
Right? And I was just like, everything was so sensitive postpartum. Like, every part of your body is just like sore and tired. And the last thing you want is to get a needle every day in the belly, and you're bruised and you're sad, and it's just like, oh. So that was
not the dream.
No, but he did that too.
Wow.
Bless his So he would always give me my needle, and because I got to the point that I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he was like, well, here we go.
Stabby.
So we did that and made it through. But yeah, I guess I haven't even really told you what HELLP syndrome really is.
Yeah, so this was your experience where you had preeclampsia and then it turned into this HELLP syndrome. Okay, yeah, so let us know. So after the fact, did you get a debrief on what happened? Did they explain to you, okay, this is what you just went through? How did that go down?
Not until my 6-week appointment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I had no idea what it was, or that it was as crazy or severe or fatal as it is, when I was going through it, or postpartum either. And so I was with the doctor, and they were checking me as well as checking Everly, but I didn't know any different. And
interesting.
So, yeah. And so I just went, and they checked my blood pressure, and they said everything looks good, and they would monitor that, but I never knew. And then at my 6-week appointment, they said, we're going to set you up with one of our therapists. And I said, why? Like, everything's good, and I don't need therapy. Like, I'm great. And they said, we don't think you realize how traumatic your birth was. Yeah. And they said, we're a little bit concerned that you're not processing it. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to someone about it, no problem. And so I went in and I chatted, and luckily, I think because I didn't know any different, and I didn't know in the moment, and I didn't know ever really, that I wasn't really concerned because I was there. I was healthy in my mind.
In your mind, yeah.
The baby. It was like I was just happy to be a mom, and I was just thriving. And so they were like, this is crazy that you're okay. And I said, I don't want to carry that with me. I don't want to have the fear that I could have from this. I would rather hold on to, I had a baby. I got to birth her vaginally. I got to be semi-present for that. I was there afterwards. She didn't have to go to the NICU. It's like I'm holding on to all of the good things that I can out of this rather than focusing on things that could have gone wrong, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And I was just saying that when you were going to pick her up, that it's interesting. Like, I think that is the intention when there's an emergency, that it's like, it's best intention sort of to protect the family from knowing that it's serious, but then it also interferes with your ability to like make informed decisions or to know what's going on, or for your partner to help you make those informed decisions, or to bring you back into your body or whatever, right? So it's like it kind of worked in both ways for you, where you're saying like, actually kind of that worked in some ways for me because I got to have this vaginal birth experience, and and that's amazing. And I'm surprised actually that they didn't just say straight to a C-section, especially with your heart concerns. But was that complication and risk, I'm sure, assessment of going under all the way with the anesthetic, that would have added risks to your blood pressure in your heart and all kinds of things too. So yeah, lots going on there. Oh my goodness. Hello, sweet one. Hello. What's mommy doing, hey? She's like, "We're just sleeping." What is this? Oh my goodness. Hi.
No.
So cute. So tell us about HELLP syndrome and preeclampsia.
Okay, so HELLP syndrome it's a acronym for hemolysis, which is when your red blood cells diminish or rupture. And
okay,
so that's where your platelet counts come in, right? As well as, so you've got hemolysis, you've got elevated liver enzymes, and low platelet levels.
Okay.
And so that's what HELLP stands for.
Okay.
And before you get to HELLP syndrome, you have preeclampsia, which is your high blood pressure, and your liver enzymes normally start overspilling.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually what the chest pain was.
Okay.
Now, I'm aware of that. Now I know. I've done a little bit more research.
Yeah.
And yes, so that is what my chest pain was. It was my liver overspilling enzymes into my bloodstream, which is not good. You do not want that.
No.
And
After talking, you gotta listen, because it's pretty serious.
Yeah.
Pretty important organ.
Yeah. And so luckily, because I had my HELLP syndrome experience first, they knew for my next birth experiences that I needed to be closely monitored. And they ended up catching my second when I had preeclampsia, and it never elevated to the point of developing HELLP syndrome.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's really good to know. Thank you for that breakdown, that there are signs and symptoms that you can listen to that will prevent. So first comes preeclampsia, then would come HELLP syndrome, but we can prevent it by tuning into the body and taking appropriate measures if something feels not right.
Yeah.
And I think I think that is something we can unpack a little bit more too is that you had the previous health history to know it wasn't heartburn, and to advocate for yourself and say, no, this is different. And I think that's like a phrase I use with my clients a lot when they're like, how will I know when I'm having contractions that are leading to birth versus like practice contractions, or like those small ones just where you're going to carry on with your days. It's like there's just this feeling of something different.
Yeah, you just know. It's weird.
It's almost indescribable, but I feel like that's the best way to say it, is it's like it'll just click that it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, like, when you do the work beforehand to get to know your body and develop a relationship with your body, whether you're forced to because of health problems or you choose to, you're on a holistic health path or you're on a healing journey, then you have a baseline. There's also something with blood pressure in particular is everybody's different. Some people have low blood pressure as their normal. Some people have a little bit more elevated as their normal baseline. So if you just give your power away, and you just defer to the person, like the nurse or whoever's taking your blood pressure on that particular moment, they might start a series of events or interventions that maybe you don't need because they're seeing it's too low or too high, even though it's your normal. So the more you can learn about yourself, the more you make the best choices, I guess, for what you need in that moment. And the more you can advocate and be like, nope, don't worry, I always have low blood pressure, it's normal. And then they might go and look in the chart and go, okay, yeah, she was right. Like, hopefully they would do some more checks and balances, but not always, as we have seen in your story, right? So advocating for yourself is so, so, so important. We shouldn't have to do it, but we do.
We do.
So tune in and pay attention. So what happened with your next experience? You were just having more regular check-ins with your blood pressure. How did they clock the preeclampsia?
So I was normal for me blood pressure throughout my pregnancy, which actually was on the lower side. And
Okay.
so people who don't know, like, a normal blood pressure is normally between like 90 over 60, 120 over 80, anywhere between those numbers is considered like normal. My low number, my bottom number, was over 100.
Okay.
And at that point, my body, this is when they said you need to go up to the hospital, my body had actually started to peel my placenta off my abdominal wall inside. And so, like, that's concerning. And so
yeah,
they were
you're
like,
not ready.
yeah, we got to go here.
Mm-hmm.
And we did all of that jazz. And that was, when was this? I guess, I don't even know where I was going with that. I've completely lost my train of thought.
So it's a good point, because that's what happens with preeclampsia. So that is the risk that, when we want a natural, most people in this channel anyway, want a natural birth experience, and this can happen. And so the risk is the body sends a signal like, hey, this person might be dying. Like, blood pressure, like, is so important, right? It's your heart. Your heart's pumping blood. We need that to be consistent to supply all of the rest of our body what it needs to do its thing. So when that's out of whack, the body might think we are dying. And so babies, as a protection method, the body will birth your baby to hopefully help you survive and also hopefully help your baby survive. So they're not still in the body in the horrible event that mom does die from something. We have a natural reflex to birth our babies in the situation. That's how I like to think of it anyway. So the placenta, as a response, needs to come out so the baby can come out, and the pregnancy signs or like messengers stop. They're like, instead, eject, right? So that's the risk. And if you don't catch it, then obviously your baby no longer has a blood supply from you through the placenta, and they can also experience problems, and potentially, the biggest risk is death for mom and for baby. So that's what happened. So that's why they are taking it hopefully very seriously and monitoring you, because sometimes when we have especially with a more complicated health history, we can see that the second time around. So, okay, so they saw it. And then what kind of steps did you take with your second baby when they started to see that your BP was off?
Okay, so with my second baby, they actually said, because you have a history of preeclampsia, you are going to take baby aspirin starting at 12 weeks and take that until you are 36 weeks pregnant.
Okay.
And so I was taking 2 tablets of baby aspirin every day for almost the entirety of my pregnancy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And they said they do that for a couple reasons, but ultimately it somehow helps your placenta attach differently to your uterine wall, was the information I was given. Not sure the actual or how it works, but that is what I was told. So I said, okay, sounds good. I just do what I was told, took the medication, and I did that throughout my entire pregnancy. I also had more frequent appointments instead of, like, I was basically considered high risk.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I was watched, instead of with Pipsy, after my first birth, the doctor that actually delivered Everly came in and said, I would really like to have you as one of my patients. And so she's a family doctor. And so she said, I would like to take you both on as patients. And so she took me and Everly both on as patients.
Nice.
And then she monitored my following pregnancies at our family doctor's office throughout till I got to the point of needing like consistent appointments. And so she did that there, which I loved, because then I'm familiar with her, but I also still know the Pipsy doctors. And I also, going into my second birth, didn't have as much, I guess, care of who was there in the moment.
Yeah.
Because I had understood now that, like, it's going to be who it's going to be. I still wanted a woman, but I was like, I'm okay with all of these ladies kind of thing. So I felt comfortable going into that. I also had done more research going into my second birth, because I wasn't aware if I had preeclampsia the first time, if I was for sure going to have it again. And that was a huge fear of mine. And so, right, because it's like you're going into something that is so unknown, but you have a past experience that is scary.
Yeah, traumatic.
Very. And so it's like trying to pull yourself out of the same situation, but convince your brain that just because you've done the same thing doesn't mean it has to happen the same way. It's a very interesting conversation to have with yourself. Yeah. And so
the mental work, like we've been talking a lot about the mental preparation for birth, and that when you've been through a traumatic experience the first time, or you have a traumatic experience that plays into the things that happen at birth, there are a lot of mental preparation would be really supportive to tell yourself that you're safe, you have options, been here before, and you can navigate it. Like, I don't know what conversations you had with yourself, but it sounds like they were kind of along that thread.
Exactly. And so we did all of the preparation work, all of the mindset work before going into my second labor. I also had developed a confidence and a different level of, like, I think it comes along with motherhood, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I learned how to advocate for myself. I learned what my boundaries were. All of those things. I think that's really important going into birth or your birth experience, that you know that it's okay to advocate for yourself, and that you need to advocate for yourself, and that it's encouraged. You should. And like your choices, it's not your choices are not ever too much, right? Like you're allowed to
Mm-hmm.
be and make it whatever you want to make it. And so, yeah, anyway, going into my second birth, they monitored me more closely. If I wanted an extra ultrasound, I asked for one. If I felt uncomfortable, I called. I wasn't scared to be loud. I wasn't scared to say, I'm uncomfortable. I'm worried about this. And I made sure that things were looked into if I had a concern about something.
Mm-hmm.
It was much different. And I was also taken much more seriously.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is so annoying because it's like you should have been taken seriously off the hop, even with your health history. Like, I don't know. I want to preface all of this, which it's not prefacing, is after the fact, but we are not medical professionals. But I know enough to know if my client has dealt with stuff and their health related things throughout their life, they know better than me. Like how things feel for them when it comes to that, you know? And like, I imagine as a nurse that you would get into a flow of patients where you're like, okay, this patient's never really been in the system anymore. I'm going to like approach them this way.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who's been through the system, you just know they know certain things. They know certain acronyms or lingo, or they've been here before. They know about blood draws or blood pressure, whatever, that you would maybe take a slightly different approach and give them, unfortunately, I don't want to say give them more, have more confidence with that patient when they tell you things, but probably. So it's annoying that it took a medical emergency on file to then have you be taken seriously.
Very. But honestly, that's been a theme throughout my entire life with my medical history.
I bet.
And I've had everything under the sun that you can imagine, and I've had it early, and I'm too young for that, and I'm too healthy for that. And so I've spent what feels like a lifetime advocating for myself in the medical system. And it wasn't until I had my kids that I felt brave enough to like really push it.
I was
And I'm like,
going to say, yeah, it also shows you too that how much work, like how broken the system is, but how much work it takes to advocate. Because just like you, like you've done it so many times for yourself. And as a mom with my son, he has some challenges that have presented, and I've also been there so many times saying the same thing. Then okay, new school year. Okay, here we go again. Here's the file. Here are the things you need to pay attention to. You don't always listen, and then you go back to the next meeting and you're like, I told you that we were going to run into this. And it's no matter how many times you do it, when you're in that system, whether it's school, whether it's hospital, government, like any of those really big machines, it's still incredibly difficult to advocate for yourself, even with the most practiced of us, right? Even with those of us who do it for a living, it's still, when it comes to you, it's really hard. It's really hard. We are up against a lot. And I think people need to understand that. It's not easy. It's not as simple as saying, nope, I'm having excruciating heart pain. That is not heartburn. It took a lot more than that for you to be taken seriously. So, whew, it's a lot.
all the things that it takes in order to be taken seriously. But once you are taken seriously, it's so rewarding and nice.
Okay, yeah, let's hear the positive. Tell us more.
So then anything I wanted throughout my second pregnancy, I asked for and I got. And I appreciated that. And I had a different level of respect with my doctor from both ends because we had gone through it together, it felt like.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've had a shared lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it a big difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and she almost feels like a friend. Like she's not a normal doctor to me. So I really
I love that.
Doctor. And so, yeah, she completely changed the experience for me and made it a positive thing. and really helped with going into my second birth to not be scared. And she encouraged me to do meditation, and she would print off resources for me on that it's not going to happen, like it doesn't have to happen again. And if it does happen again, handled it, right? Like she provided a comfort that I needed. And I really appreciate it.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. I'm really glad to hear that.
I feel like it's very commonly heard of from OBs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think that there's a conversation that we have, right? Like, how do you, within the system, how can you create some change within? And as much as I struggle with that, because I think we need some new ones, just by virtue of you being there, I think, and asking for the resources. Hey, can you print me out this? She's going to hopefully be doing that for future clients too. And maybe even preemptively, like, hey, I printed out this article. You know, this is where I kind of come from with my philosophy on this. And yeah, you can do this without, like, it doesn't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can change the game here, and I'm on your team. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was very comforting. So going into that one, I felt really good. I felt really supported. I felt more aware and educated, and I felt a lot better going into my second birth experience. And then they caught the preeclampsia at just my high blood pressure, and I had no bad experience. I danced my whole time I was in the hospital. They said, we're holy balloon, and they said, we're going to keep you this time just in case anything goes crazy. And I said, perfect, no problem. So they kept me overnight, and I was up making TikToks and dancing, and I was on Instagram, and I was like living my best life in the hospital. And I slept until like 6 o'clock in the morning. And well, it was probably about 5:45 that I slept until, and she was 6:02.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It was the most blissful, like, experience, and exactly what I needed after my first experience to be like, I was so proud that I was like, I didn't let the fear come with me into all of my births, because it doesn't have to happen again. And it didn't, and it's not going to be the same. And then my third birth was even completely different than the previous two, and I had no preeclampsia, no preterm labor. Like, it was, yeah, very, very good.
That's so good. Yeah, I think that's such an important part of your story to hear. Like, you can shift things, you can change, but you have to do that work to prepare yourself and to comfort and validate and, yeah, just like get work through it in whatever way makes sense to you, but to bring in that positivity, to know that you are in control of shifting some of that fear out. Maybe it'll still hang out in the background just a little bit as a precaution, but for the most part, you were determined to have a positive experience, and sounds like you've had 2 wonderful redemption birth experiences.
Thankfully. And even with my first, with it being like, so many people were like, oh my God, everything went wrong. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Look at all the things that went right? And who gets to say what is a right and a wrong birth? With birth, like, what's going to happen? And who knows what's right and what's wrong and what's supposed to happen and all of the things. So the funniest part of my birth story with Everly was I had wanted everything to be as perfect and wonderful as I could be. And like I said, I try and control what I can control. And so I really wanted to have a home birth. I really wanted to have a midwife. I really wanted to do all of the things naturally. And it was just not an option. And then I went through with the hospital birth, and I said, you know what, all I want is I'm going to hire a birth photographer, because then at least I have that I can hold on. And so things were crazy, and they went from 0 to 100 so quickly. And poor Jord called the birth photographer, and her hospital parking ticket was Everly's birth time.
Oh, no. Yeah, that can happen.
Oh, and then but in hindsight, I'm like, honestly, probably don't want pictures of all of that going on.
They might have kicked her out too, right? They might have said, we have 1,000 people that need to come in here, so sorry, goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's really funny because this morning, I had messaged you last night to just check in and say, good, but I didn't get your message until this morning when I got home. But we were talking today about, so I volunteer at the Breakfast Club program at my kids' school, and then the volunteers go out for breakfast afterwards and chat. Yeah, it's cute. They're like between like 70 and 86 years old or something, so it's very fun. But we were talking about shared birthdays, and then you have a shared birthday, so it was very, very it's like a look into the future conversation. I'm getting a little hint from Spirit as to what we're going to be talking about today.
I love that.
Very funny. Yeah, but everything unfolds as it should, and yeah, we can only control little bits and pieces here and there from ourselves, and the rest of birth is like a total surrender. And the more you can reframe the experience to be positive, I think the more you'll enjoy it and the more you'll get out of it. So that's amazing. Scully, no crying. My cat is carrying around a glove and crying. It's a Christmas tradition. It's a circus over here. Okay, well, I love this conversation. Thank you so much, and thank you for doing this with us.
Thank you so much for having me and including me and our guest.
Yes, she's so cute.
Okay.
We have Leah's story coming up at 2 p.m. So if you are around, tune in for that. She's also going to talk about letting go of expectations. So I'm excited. So we will look forward to this replay working. We're going to cross our fingers that the Instagram peeps are on our side. And we have Leah, and then we'll start again on Monday with the next crew. So
amazing.
Thank you, Carly. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.